Привет, друзья! Как дела? My name is Fedor and welcome back to Be Fluent in Russian podcast. Today we have Pushkin again. We're continuing our cultural education, Russian culture podcasts. We have two poems that all first graders in Russia are forced to memorize and to read in front of the whole class. Not to read it off a piece of paper, but to recite it from memory. These are pretty small. Well, the first one is kind of small. Second one is 25, 28 lines. No, 30 lines. So it's not the easiest one to memorize, but we're going to simply read it. I still, of course, don't know them by heart from school times. I kind of forgot it by now, but we're going to read it first and then do it again, second time with translations. And of course, as we're going through it, I'll give you some insight to Pushkin and Pushkin's life. But in fact, before we get started, if you don't know who Pushkin is, it's your first time even hearing the name Pushkin, he is considered to be the most famous, the most talented poet in Russia. And he lived in the 19th century, and he is still considered to be one of the best because of how succinct and how easy flowing his poems are. Imagine this. It's been 200 years ever since he wrote his last poem, but we still can read it despite all the language changes. We still think of him as the best poet. He is really, truly very masterful, very skillful, very talented, and his word is so just magical. I don't know any other way to express it really, but truly magical. So the first poem. It's called Няне, to the nurse, or to the babysitter. He had a babysitter or a nurse who raised him. And she didn't just raise him and teach him things, but she became a very important figure in his life. During the times of kind of persecution and going against the government and the state, she would be his savior. She would be his person that he'll go to, he can trust with all of his deepest kind of thoughts and all of that. So she was a very crucial figure in his life. And here's a poem to her. Pushkin, Няне. Подруга дней моих суровых, Голубка дряхлая моя, Одна в глуши лесов сосновых, Давно, давно ты ждешь меня. Ты под окном своей светлицы Горюешь, будто на часах, и медлят поминутно спицы в твоих наморщенных руках. Глядишь в забытые вороты, на черный отдаленный путь. Тоска, предчувствия, заботы теснят твою всечасно грудь. То чудится тебе, and then this poem gets cut off. Mid-sentence, not even finished the line. Of course, probably it was lost somehow, some way. Maybe it was burned or something, or it wasn't recovered fully. Maybe he just didn't finish it. But it's an incomplete poem, but still just within these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines, there's a lot of care, a lot of language in it. So let's read it again and translate it. Подруга дней моих суровых. My days of harshness, faithful friend. So Подруга is a friend, female friend. So he is calling his nurse, not a medical nurse, but a nurse who raises you. Подруга, a friend. Дней моих суровых, days of my harshness. Okay, so she was a friend of his harsh days. During his harshest days, again, going against the state, he was persecuted a lot. And she would be his friend in those times. And then he calls her Голубка дряхлая моя. Голубка is a dove. So my aged dove. Моя, of course, means mine. And дряхлая means aged. But дряхлая is really when a person... how to best describe this? Is when a person kind of withered, okay? Maybe physically. They don't look the most, I don't know, physically healthy. Дряхлый is when a person is kind of, maybe hunched over, maybe just old, but I think the translation of my aged little dove is a good translation. So let's keep going. Одна в глуши лесов сосновых, давно ты ждешь меня. Alone in the wilderness of pine forests, you've been waiting for me for so long. So, одна means alone. It's a feminine version. Один means alone for guys. But одна, since it's a her, в глуши in the wilderness. Лесов, forests. Сосновых means pine. So, in the deep wilderness of pine forest, you alone, давно, for long, ты ждешь меня. You're waiting for me. So, she is somewhere in the village, somewhere, in the forest, waiting for him. She misses him. And in those times, of course, right now, if somebody misses you, you call them. But what are you supposed to do during those times? You write a poem to them and send it by mail. So it's not really that easy. So then he continues. Ты под окном своей светлицы горюешь, будто на часах. Beneath your chamber's window, you grieve as though upon the hour. So, горюешь is not grief when it comes to you losing someone, but you just simply, you are sad. You're being sad. Под окном, under the window, своей светлицы, your chamber. So you are being sad under the window of your chamber. Будто на часах, as if by the hour or upon the hour. I think, well, the translation is kind of different. The translation is upon the hour. I think будто на часах is like by the hour you get sadder and sadder and sadder. Maybe because he's not there, she misses him, and all of that. И медлят поминутно спицы в твоих наморщенных руках. And needles in your wrinkled hands are getting slower with each minute. So, with each minute, the needles that she's using to knit something, of course, during those days, you knit your own clothes and you don't go just to any store and buy them, you make them yourself. And so, with each minute, the needles that you knit with are going slower and slower and slower in your wrinkled hands. В твоих, in your наморщенных, wrinkled, руках, hands. A funny thing in Russian, руки or рука is a hand, but also an arm. Okay? But of course, we don't say in somebody's arms when something is located in somebody's arms. We say in somebody's hands. So here руках means hands. Глядишь в забытые вороты, на черный отдаленный путь. You peer through the forgotten gates towards the distant blackened path. So she is looking in the gates of forgotten gates. People forgot about those gates. Maybe back when she was younger, her place was very popular, but now it's forgotten. People don't go there anymore. So, forgotten gates, what does that mean? The gates don't open anymore, right? So, he's painting the picture of a sad old woman who is longing for her kind of a son, So, yeah. На черный отдаленный путь, toward the distant blackened path. Maybe it's a path somewhere out there where she's expecting him to come ride on his horse and come to her, or ride in a carriage or something. So she's, waiting for him. Тоска, предчувствия, заботы теснят твою сейчас на грудь. Melancholy, premonitions, and worries crowd upon your chest incessantly. So тоска, being bored and just, melancholy. I think I said this word right, melancholy, maybe not. In Russian we have melancholia for that word. Premonitions, which is, when you expect something. And заботы, worries. Теснят, they crowd your chest. And всечасно means at all times, just without stop. And then he continues, but the line gets cut off. То чудится тебе, sometimes you imagine something. This poem is very short, only 12 lines. And maybe he just paints the picture of her being sad about something. But then he says, well, don't lose hope, and then this, that, and the third. He had that in his mind, maybe, but we don't know that. He gets cut off. So I think he just set the tone for her sadness, but he doesn't continue. He doesn't change the setting. He doesn't use the setting in any way. So it only leads us to think maybe it was coming. Who knows? Who knows? I guess it's going to be the story. It's going to be the secret for ages now. And a little bit about her. His Няня, which is nurse or babysitter, her name was Irina Rodionovna. Irina is her first name. Rodionovna is her patronymic. And she wasn't just his nurse, like I mentioned. She was really a motherly figure to him. He could trust her. She was his... I don't think he had parents that raised him. I might be wrong, but a common notion is that she was his motherly figure who raised him. And, he doesn't just address... So, Няня as a person, right, back in the day, it's a peasant woman who would raise your kids. She's a servant to your family. But you don't just address your servant as a Подруга, as a friend, as a dove, Голубка. You don't do those things. So he really cherished their relationship. And, and after the imperial disfavor, when the empire kind of disfavored him and sent him away, he would long for their conversations and her presence in his life. That's the first poem. Second poem, if you read the first line to any Russian person, they can continue with the second line. I think this might be his most famous poem. This one is called Зимнее утро, which means winter morning. He'll be talking about nature. He really loved nature and describing nature. So here goes. If you read this first line, any native would read the second line to you without even knowing, without having the text. So here goes. Мороз и солнце, день чудесный. Еще ты дремлешь, друг прелестный. Пора, красавица, проснись. Открой сомкнутой негой взоры. Навстречу северной авроры звездою севера явись. Вечер, ты помнишь, вьюга злилась. На мутном небе мгла носилась. Луна, как бледное пятно, сквозь тучи мрачные желтела. И ты печальная сидела. А нынче погляди в окно. Под голубыми небесами, великолепными коврами, блестя на солнце, снег лежит. Прозрачный лес один чернеет, и ель сквозь иней зеленеет, и речка подо льдом блестит. Вся комната янтарным блеском озарена. Веселым треском трещит затопленная печь. Приятно думать у лежанки. Но знаешь, не велеть ли санки кобылку бурую запречь? Скользя по утреннему снегу, друг милый, предадимся бегу нетерпеливого коня и навестим поля пустые, леса, недавно столь густые, и берег, милый для меня. How beautiful. And it just flows. I read it after a long time of not reading this poem, and it's just like a river that just flows, and the words, they flow, and the rhythm is just so easy. Мороз и солнце, день чудесный, еще ты дремлешь, друг прелестный, пора, красавица, проснись, открой сомкнутый негой взор. It's so easy to read it because it rhymes. The rhythm is ta 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 ta. It's really super rhythmic, and it's just so easy to read. And I hope that you guys can, even if you don't understand all the words from this poem, you can still appreciate that, and maybe through my reading you can hear it a bit. Though I'm not the most talented poem reader, I hope that still through my readings you can hear how just easy flowing it is. So let's do it again and translate each line. Here, we won't spend as much time on translating each line because pretty much everything is self-explanatory from just the translations. There's not a lot of hidden meanings compared to the first one. Мороз и солнце, день чудесный. I said frost, like I'm reading the Russian intonation, a Russian accent. Frost and sun, a wonderful day. Еще ты дремлешь, друг прелестный. You're still dozing, or you're still dreaming or sleeping, my enchanting friend. Who is he saying to his who is his friend? I'm not sure. Maybe just the day is still sleeping. Пора, красавица, проснись. It is time, beauty, wake up. Открой сомкнутые негой взоры. Open your lazily closed eyes. Навстречу северной авроры. Towards the northern aurora. I think it's a star in the sky. So open your eyes. It's time. Wake up. Open your eyes. Look up to the sky and see. Звездою севера явись. Appear as the star of the north. I think he's talking about the sun, right? I think he's talking about the sun. It's time to wake up and show yourself. The day has begun. Вечер, ты помнишь, вьюга злилась. Evening, do you remember? The blizzard was raging. Maybe he is saying, addressing the evening. Hey, evening, remember, last night it was the blizzard. Or maybe he's saying, last night it was a blizzard, just like without addressing anybody. На мутном небе мгла носилась. A dark haze drifted across the cloudy sky. Луна, как бледное пятно, the moon, like a pale spot, сквозь тучи мрачные желтела, yellowed through the gloomy clouds. И ты, печальная, сидела, and you sat there so sad. А нынче, погляди в окно. But today, look out the window. So, let's read the English translation to, paint a full picture. Frost and sun. It's a winter morning. Frost and sun. Wonderful day. You are still dozing, my enchanting friend. It's time, beauty. Wake up. Open your lazily closed eyes towards the northern aurora. Appear as the star of the north. Last night, do you remember? The blizzard was raging. A dark haze drifted across the cloudy sky. The moon, like a pale spot, yellowed through the gloomy clouds. And you sat there so sad. But today, look out the window. And then let's go back to Russian. Под голубыми небесами великолепными коврами. Under the blue skies, magnificent carpets. He's describing the clouds as the carpets. Блестя на солнце, снег лежит. Glistening in the sun, the snow lies. The snow is there. Прозрачный лес один чернеет. The transparent forest stands dark alone. If you don't experience winter wherever you are, in the winter, especially in Russia, when it's super snowy, right? It's white. Just like maybe also a carpet or a cover of white. But then if you look in the forest in the winter doesn't have any leaves. And if you look through the forest, even though he describes it as transparent, there's no leaves, the trunks of the trees and the branches, they kind of, if you look through it, they'll be black, right? And so you see only the black forest is only black. The rest is all white from snow. И ель сквозь иней зеленеет. And the fir tree, green through the forest. The only tree that is green is fir tree. And so you see the black forest, but the green fir tree. Because the fir doesn't drop its quote-unquote leaves or spikes or whatever they're called. И речка подо льдом блестит. And the river glistens under the ice. Вся комната янтарным блеском озарена. The whole room is lit with the amber glow. Веселым треском трещит затопленная печь. With a cheerful crackle, the lit stove crackles. So, when you have a stove, when you have a bonfire, when you have a fireplace, it crackles, right? And so he's talking about the amber glow from the sun just covers your room, and then you hear the crackles of the fire. Of course, back then, there's no radiators, no heating system. You have a stove or furnace in your house. And so that's how you get warm. And so you wake up in the morning with the sun in your room and the crackle of the stove and of the furnace. Приятно думать у лежанки. It's pleasant to muse on the bench, or to think, to ponder, laying there on the bench. Но знаешь, не велеть ли в санке кобылку бурую запречь? But you know what? What about harness, or to order to harness the chestnut horse into the sleigh? Should we go out there and ride horses on the sleigh in this snow? Why not? Скользя по утреннему снегу, gliding over the morning snow, друг милый, предадимся бегу нетерпеливого коня. Dear friend, let's give in to the run of the impatient horse. И навестим поля пустые, and visit the empty fields. Леса, недавно столь густые, the forest, recently so dense. И берег, милый для меня. And the shore, that's dear to me. First, he paints the picture of the frost and sun and this wonderful day. Wake up! Yesterday you saw the blizzard and it was crazy and it was gloomy and you were sad there. But today, look out the window. There's the skies and the snow is glistening and the forest is green with just a fir tree and then this river there. And the whole room is lit with this amber glow and the crackle of the forest. And then you're just sitting there pondering about stuff. But you know what? Should we go ride the horses in the sleigh on the snow? And then we give in to the horses' ride, and then we go to the forest and to the fields and go to the shore that I love so much. That's the genius of Pushkin. And of course, the translation doesn't give it justice. The poetic rhymes and just the rhythmic scheme is just incredible. That is it. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I hope you've gotten something from this. And if you are interested in reading these poems by yourself, I'll leave them in the description to this podcast. You can check it out. And also, of course, if you want to learn Russian and speak it to your friends, to your family, and have a good time doing that and have fun speaking and not always think of, what's the next word? How am I supposed to say this? Oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. If you want to avoid that but learn to speak freely, join a Be Fluent class right now with the first link in the description to this podcast as well. We'll teach you how to do that. Check it out, and I'll see you all next time, and hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Пока-пока.